The dinner plates clinked softly as Ambassador Jake Mitchell cut into his synthetic beef. Across the polished metal table, the Zeltharian delegate's tentacles moved gracefully as he spoke about trade agreements. The creature's blue skin shimmered under the warm lights of the diplomatic dining hall aboard the Starbound Endeavor. "Your species shows great promise in quantum technology," the alien said through his translator device. "The Zeltharian Commerce Guild is most interested in expanding our partnership with Earth." Jake nodded and smiled. 2 years ago, humans had barely made contact with alien life. Now they sat at tables with creatures from across the galaxy, talking business like old friends. It still amazed him sometimes. Lisa Parker, his aide, sat quietly beside him, taking notes on her tablet. She was young but sharp, and Jake trusted her judgment. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she wore the standard blue uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. "We appreciate the Guild's interest," Jake replied. "Earth is ready to share our technology with peaceful trading partners." The Zeltharian's large black eyes blinked slowly. "Peace is profitable. War is expensive. This is why the Guild works only with civilized species." Jake was about to respond when the ship's communication officer burst through the dining hall doors. Lieutenant Ben Clark looked pale and shaken. His hands trembled as he held a datapad. "Ambassador Mitchell, sir. We have an emergency transmission, coming in on all galactic frequencies. It's from the Vorthak Empire." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The Zeltharian delegate's tentacles stopped moving entirely. Everyone knew about the Vorthak Empire. They controlled nearly 200 worlds through fear and brutal force. Most species in the galaxy tried to avoid them completely. "Put it on." "The main screen," Jake ordered. The wall display activated, showing the official seal of the Vorthak Empire. A deep, mechanical voice began speaking in Galactic Standard, the common language used for interspecies communication. "Citizens of the galaxy, witness the price of defying Vorthak authority." The image changed to show a massive arena filled with thousands of beings from different species. They were chained together in long lines, their clothes torn and dirty. Guards in black armor stood around them, holding energy weapons. Jake's stomach twisted as he recognized some of the faces. Humans, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "These criminals attempted to interfere with lawful Vorthak operations," the voice continued. "They rescued slaves who were rightfully claimed by the Empire. They attacked our ships and stations. Now they face justice." On the screen, a tall figure in elaborate red armor stepped forward. Emperor Zekthul himself, ruler of the Vorthak Empire. His face was hidden behind a golden mask, but his voice was clear and cold. "Let this be a lesson to all who would challenge our power. The Vorthak Empire shows no mercy to terrorists and rebels." Jake leaned forward, studying the screen more closely. In the third row of prisoners, he saw a face that made his blood run cold. Commander Rick Torres, a human officer who had led a rescue mission 6 months ago. The mission had failed, and all the soldiers were reported dead. But Rick was alive. Or had been, until today. "Begin the execution," Emperor Zekthul commanded. What followed was 20 minutes of horror that Jake would never forget. The guards moved down the lines of prisoners, executing them one by one with energy weapons. The camera showed everything in sharp detail. The fear in the victims' eyes, the sounds they made, the way their bodies fell. 40,000 beings died while Jake watched. Men, women, and children from dozens of different species. The humans died bravely, Jake noticed. Many of them stood straight and looked their killers in the eye. Rick Torres shouted something that the audio couldn't pick up, but Jake could read his lips. "Earth will remember." Then Rick was gone, like all the others. The broadcast ended with Emperor Zekthul addressing the camera directly. "This is the fate of all who oppose the Vorthak Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 1,000 years, and we will rule for 1,000 more. Resist us, and die." The screen went black. The dining hall was completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Lisa had dropped her tablet and tears were running down her face. The Zeltharian delegate's tentacles were wrapped tightly around his body, a sign of extreme fear in his species. 40,000, Lisa whispered. They killed 40,000 people and broadcast it across the galaxy. Jake stood up slowly. His legs felt weak, but his mind was clear. Lieutenant Clark, get me a direct line to Earth Command, Priority 1. Yes, sir. Lisa, I need you to record everything we just saw, every detail. We're going to need evidence. Evidence for what? She asked, though Jake could see in her eyes that she already knew. We're going to the Galactic Council. We're going to demand justice for those people. The Zeltharian delegate made a sound like a strangled whistle. Ambassador Mitchell, please reconsider. The Vorthak Empire is not to be challenged. They have millions of ships, billions of soldiers. No one opposes them and survives. Someone has to, Jake said firmly. If we don't stand up to them now, how many more will die? How long before they decide humans are too troublesome to let live? But they are too powerful, the alien protested. Even the great civilizations fear them. The Altarians pay tribute to avoid war. The Kepler Federation signed a non-aggression pact. What can one small species do against such might? Jake looked at the blank screen where Rick Torres had died. Rick had been his friend at the academy. They had shared dreams of exploring the stars and meeting alien civilizations. Rick had died trying to free slaves from Vorthak labor camps. Maybe we can't beat them, Jake admitted. But we can't let this go unanswered. Those people died because they tried to help others. If we stay silent now, we're telling the galaxy that human lives don't matter, that innocent lives don't matter. Lieutenant, Clark returned with his communication device. Sir, I have Admiral Kate Sullivan on the line. She's requesting an immediate report. Jake took the device. Admiral, I'm transmitting the broadcast recording now. We need to convene the Global Defense Council immediately. I saw it too, Jake, came the reply. The Admiral's voice was tight with controlled anger. The whole fleet saw it. 847 humans died in that arena, including Rick Torres and his entire unit. I recognized him, Jake said quietly. So did I. He was a good officer, a good man. There was a pause. What do you need from me, Ambassador? Support for a formal complaint to the Galactic Council. We're going to demand they take action against the Vorthak Empire for war crimes. Another pause, longer this time. You know what that could mean, don't you? If we push this, they might come for Earth. Jake looked around the dining hall. The Zeltharian delegate was speaking rapidly into his own communication device, probably reporting to his superiors. Lisa was still recording details, her fingers flying over her tablet despite her tears. Lieutenant Clark stood at attention waiting for orders. Admiral, 40,000 people just died on live broadcast and the killers are bragging about it. If we don't act now, when will we? Understood, Ambassador. You'll have the full support of Earth Command. Bring them to justice. Jake handed the device back to Clark and turned to face his aide. Lisa, prepare a formal diplomatic request for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. We're going to Concordia Prime. Sir, she said, looking up from her tablet. What if the other species won't support us? What if we're alone in this? Jake thought about Rick Torres standing straight as he faced his executioners, about the 846 other humans who had died with him, about the thousands of other beings who had been murdered for the crime of seeking freedom. Then we'll be alone, he said, but we'll still be right. The Galactic Council chamber on Concordia Prime was the largest room Jake had ever seen. 847 different species had representatives sitting in curved rows that rose up like a giant amphitheater. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the top. Jake stood at the center podium, feeling very small. His blue Earth uniform looked plain compared to the exotic clothing and natural features of the alien delegates around him. Some had scales, others had fur. A few glowed with their own light, but most of them wouldn't look at him directly. Lisa sat in the Earth delegation section, her recording equipment ready. She had spent 3 days preparing evidence for this moment. Video files, audio recordings, witness statements, everything. They needed to prove what the Vorthak Empire had done. The council speaker, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, called the session to order. The Galactic Council recognizes Ambassador Jake Mitchell of Earth, who has requested this emergency session. Jake stepped forward to the speaking platform. His voice echoed throughout the massive chamber. Honorable delegates, 3 days ago the Vorthak Empire broadcast the execution of 40,000 innocent beings across all galactic frequencies. This was not justice. This was murder. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Jake could see many delegates shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The Vorthak section remained perfectly still. General Crexmore, their representative, sat like a statue carved from black stone. His red eyes never blinked. I present to this council video evidence of these war crimes, Jake continued. He activated the holographic display above the podium. The images appeared for all to see. The chamber fell silent as the execution footage played. Jake had edited it down to 5 minutes, but it was still hard to watch. He saw delegates covering their eyes or looking away. A few got up and left their seats entirely. When the video ended, Jake spoke again. Among the dead were 847 humans, including women and children. But this wasn't just an attack on humanity. 23 different species lost citizens in that arena. The Vorthak Empire wants us to believe this was justice, but I ask you, what crime did those children commit? What threat did unarmed civilians pose to a galactic empire? General Crexmore rose from his seat. He was nearly 8 feet tall, with thick armor covering his body. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. The human speaks of innocence, but he lies. Those executed were terrorists who attacked lawful Vorthak operations. They freed slaves who were legally owned property. They destroyed Imperial facilities and killed Imperial citizens. Slavery is illegal under galactic law, Jake shot back. The Vorthak Empire signed the Sentient Rights Treaty 200 years ago. Laws change, Crexmore replied. The strong make rules for the weak. This has always been the way of the galaxy. A new voice spoke up from the far side of the chamber. May I address the council? Jake turned to see a small elderly woman walking down the steps toward the podium. She wore a simple gray dress and walked with a cane. Jake recognized her immediately. Dr. Helen Brooks, the xenobiologist who had survived the Vorthak prison camps. The council speaker nodded. Dr. Brooks, you may speak. Helen approached the podium slowly. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. Every delegate in the chamber leaned forward to hear her. I was there when they came for us. She began. My research team was studying plant life on Kepler-7 when Vorthak forces attacked the colony. They took everyone, scientists, farmers, children, elderly people. Anyone who couldn't work was killed immediately. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the Vorthak delegates were listening. They put us in camps, Helen continued. Hundreds of beings from different species, all crammed together in metal boxes. The food was spoiled, the water was dirty. People got sick and died every day. But that wasn't the worst part. She paused, gathering strength to continue. The worst part was watching them choose who would die for entertainment. Every week they would pick prisoners at random and force them to fight each other. Or they would make parents watch as they hurt their children. They called it discipline, but it was torture. General Crexmore stood up. This woman is clearly lying. The Vorthak Empire treats all prisoners according to galactic standards. Helen turned to look at him directly. I have scars from your electroshock devices. I watched a Vorthak guard beat a 10-year-old boy to death because he cried too loudly. I saw your soldiers laughing as they threw bodies into waste disposal units. Lies, Crexmore repeated, but his voice sounded less certain now. I escaped when human forces attacked the prison transport, Helen said. Commander Rick Torres and his team died trying to save us. They knew it was a trap, but they came. Anyway, because they couldn't leave innocent people to suffer. Jake felt his throat tighten. Rick had always been the type to help others, even when it meant danger for himself. Helen looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as possible. The humans who died in that arena weren't terrorists. They were heroes. They gave their lives trying to free people who couldn't free themselves. She turned back to the podium. The question before this council isn't whether the Vorthak Empire is strong enough to do whatever they want. The question is whether we're going to let them. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Jake could see delegates looking at each other, whispering quietly. The Vorthak section remained motionless. Finally, Senator Veltanos of the Thrakari Federation spoke up. While we sympathize with the losses described here, we must remember that the Vorthak Empire is a sovereign government. They have the right to deal with criminals as they see fit. Criminals? Jake's voice rose. Those children were criminals? Those scientists were criminals? The Vorthak Empire says they were, Veltanos replied. Who are we to question their internal affairs? Jake felt anger building in his chest. If we don't question this, then what's next? How many more have to die before we say enough? The human asks dangerous questions, said another delegate. The Vorthak Empire has kept peace in this galaxy for centuries. Perhaps some methods are harsh, but they are effective. Peace through. Fear isn't peace, Jake said. It's just delayed war. General Crexmore stood again. The human speaks boldly for such a young species. Perhaps Earth needs to learn the value of silence. The threat was clear to everyone in the chamber. Jake felt the mood shift. Many delegates who had seemed sympathetic before now looked away. The reality of Vorthak power was settling over them like a heavy blanket. But then another voice spoke. Up. I would like to address the council. A tall, graceful being with silver skin and large eyes had risen from her seat. Jake recognized her as Ambassador Jinka of the Altarian Republic. The Altarian Republic lost 12,000 citizens in the broadcast execution, she said. They were archaeologists studying ancient ruins on Vega Prime. They carried no weapons. They threatened no one. Yet they died alongside the humans and others. She looked directly at General Crexmore. The Vorthak Empire claims they were terrorists, but our records show they were peaceful scholars. If studying history is now terrorism, then we are all in danger. Several other delegates began to stir. Jake saw nods of agreement from species he didn't recognize. Ambassador Jinka continued. The human ambassador asks for justice. This is not an unreasonable request. If we allow mass murder to go unpunished, we make ourselves complicit in future atrocities. The Altarians speak of justice, Crexmore said, his voice growing louder. But they pay tribute to the Vorthak Empire every year. Their words are empty. We pay tribute because we value the lives of our people. Jinka replied calmly. But there comes a time when the cost of peace becomes too high. Jake seized the moment. The Galactic Council was founded to prevent exactly this kind of brutality. If we don't act now, then what purpose do we serve? He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces. Some looked afraid, others angry, many confused. But he could see something else in their eyes now. A flicker of hope. I'm not asking you to go to war, Jake said. I'm asking you to stand up for what's right. To say that innocent life has value, no matter what species it belongs to. The council. Speaker called for order as delegates began talking among themselves. Jake could see heated discussions breaking out in several sections. The Vorthak delegates sat in stony silence, but Jake noticed they were watching the other species carefully. As the session was called to recess, Ambassador Jinka approached Jake. We need to talk, she said quietly. There are others who feel, as we do, but they're afraid to speak openly. Jake nodded. Change was possible, but it would take courage from all of them. General Crexmore passed nearby as he left the chamber. He stopped and looked down at Jake with those burning red eyes. Your species should learn when to stay silent, human, he said in a low voice. The Vorthak Empire has a long memory. Jake met his gaze without flinching. So do humans. The emergency meeting room in the Earth Government building was packed with the most important people on the planet. President Nathan Cross sat at the head of the long table, his gray hair catching the light from the overhead screens. Maps of Yao. The galaxy covered every wall, showing trade routes, military positions, and Vorthak territory marked in red. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood beside a holographic display showing fleet positions. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. Her uniform showed the patches of dozens of successful missions, but nothing like what they were discussing now. The numbers aren't good, she said bluntly. The Vorthak Empire has over 50,000 warships spread across 200 worlds. We have 300 ships in our entire fleet. Director Paul Carter from Earth Intelligence leaned forward. He was a thin man with thick glasses who rarely spoke in meetings. But when he did, people listened. It's worse than just numbers. They have battle experience. They've been fighting wars for 1,000 years. Most of our ships have never seen real combat. President Cross rubbed his temples. The weight of 8 billion human lives rested on his shoulders. What about our allies? How many species are willing to stand with us? Jake's voice came through the quantum communicator from Concordia Prime. The technology was new, allowing instant communication across any distance in the galaxy. 23 species have agreed to support us, but most of them secretly. They're afraid of Vorthak retaliation. 23 species sounds like a lot, said General Mike Davis, head of Earth's ground forces. What kind of military strength are we talking about? That's the problem, Jake replied. Most of them are small civilizations. The Altarians have about 200 ships. The Kepler Federation has maybe 50. Together we might have 1,500 ships total. Admiral Sullivan shook her head. 1,500 against 50,000. Those aren't fighting odds. Those are suicide odds. The room fell quiet. Through the large windows they could see the lights of New York City stretching to the horizon. Somewhere out there, families were going about their normal lives, not knowing that their government was discussing a war that could destroy their entire species. Dr. Helen Brooks spoke up from her seat near the back of the room. She had returned to Earth 2 days ago and still looked tired from her ordeal. I've been thinking about what I saw in the Vorthak camps. They're not just cruel, they're wasteful. They throw away resources, destroy useful equipment, kill workers they could use. That's not the behavior of an efficient military. What are you suggesting? President Cross asked. They've been winning through fear for so long that they've forgotten how to really fight. When someone actually hits back, they might not be as strong as they appear. Director Carter pulled up new information on his tablet. Our intelligence suggests she might be right. The Vorthak Empire hasn't fought a real war in over 200 years. They've been dealing with small rebellions and minor conflicts. Nothing that required their full military strength. Chief Engineer Ryan Walsh entered the room carrying a sealed folder. He was younger than most of the others, barely 30, but he had designed half of Earth's current technology. Sorry I'm late. I was running final tests on something you all need to see. He opened the folder and activated a holographic projector. The image showed a sleek spacecraft unlike anything in the current Earth fleet. It was smaller than a normal warship but looked faster and more advanced. Project Prometheus, Ryan announced. We've been working on it for 3 years in secret. It's a new type of ship that doesn't need jump gates for faster-than-light travel. Admiral Sullivan leaned forward, interested. How is that possible? Every ship in the galaxy uses the gate network. We've created a quantum drive system that bends space around the ship, Ryan explained. It's based on human AI technology that no other species has developed. We can appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The implications hit everyone at once. The entire galactic military strategy was based on controlling jump gates. If you controlled the gates, you controlled where ships could go. But if humans could bypass the gates entirely, how many ships can we build with this technology? President Cross asked. We've already converted 50 ships in secret, Ryan said. We can convert another 100 within 2 months. It's not enough to match their numbers, but it gives us an advantage they won't expect. Jake's voice came through the communicator again. There's something else. Ambassador Jinka told me that several Vorthak worlds have been experiencing rebellions. Planets they conquered centuries ago are starting to fight back. They're spreading their forces thin, trying to maintain control. Director Carter nodded. Our intelligence confirms this. The Vorthak Empire looks strong from the outside, but they're dealing with problems on dozens of worlds. If we hit them at the right time and place, we could start a chain reaction, Admiral Sullivan finished. Show the galaxy that they can be beaten. Dr. Helen Brooks raised her hand. I have information about their military installations. During my time in the camps, I memorized everything I could. Guard rotations, supply schedules, weak points in their defenses. She pulled out a hand-drawn map. This is the layout of their main prison complex on Vorthak Prime, but it's also where they keep their central command computers. If we could get inside. President Cross studied the faces around the table. These were good people, smart people, but they were talking about going to war with a galactic empire. The risk was enormous. Let me make sure I understand, he said slowly. We're outnumbered 50-1. We're facing an enemy with 1,000 years of military experience. If we lose, they'll probably destroy Earth completely. That's about right, Admiral Sullivan confirmed. But if we do nothing, they'll eventually come for us anyway. And 40,000 innocent people will have died for nothing. Also correct. President Cross stood up and walked to the window. The city lights sparkled below him like stars. Somewhere out there, children were sleeping safely in their beds, trusting that the adults would protect them. He turned back to the room. Admiral Sullivan, I'm giving you command of this operation. Use whatever resources you need. Our goal isn't to conquer the Vorthak Empire. It's to free the people they've enslaved and show the galaxy that bullies can be stopped. Admiral Sullivan stood at attention. What should we call the operation, sir? Operation Righteous Fury, the president replied. Because that's exactly what this is. Jake's voice came through the communicator one more time. Mr. President, the secret alliance is ready to move when you give the word. But we need to strike fast and hard. If we give them time to prepare, we'll lose our only advantage. How long do you need? President Cross asked Admiral Sullivan. She thought for a moment. 6 weeks to convert the ships and train the crews. We'll need to coordinate with 23 different species, each with their own military protocols. It won't be easy. Make it happen, the president ordered. And Admiral, bring our people home. As the meeting broke up, people began making calls and sending messages across the galaxy. The largest military operation in human history was about to begin. Dr. Helen Brooks approached Admiral Sullivan as she was leaving. Admiral, I want to volunteer for the mission. Doctor, you've been through enough. We can't ask you to go back there. Helen's eyes were hard with determination. Those people died trying to save others like me. If there's a chance to stop the Vorthak Empire from hurting anyone else, I have to help. Admiral Sullivan studied the older woman's face. She saw the same look she'd seen in the mirror every morning since watching the execution broadcast. The look of someone who couldn't stand by and do nothing. All right, Doctor. Welcome to Operation Righteous Fury. 6 weeks later, ships from 24 different species gathered at a secret location in empty space. They came from different worlds, had different technologies, and spoke different languages. But they all shared the same goal: to end the Vorthak Empire's reign of terror. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the smallest species could make the biggest difference, and that humans, when they fought for justice, rarely fought alone. The bridge of the Liberty's Edge buzzed with activity as Admiral Kate Sullivan watched the tactical display. Hundreds of green dots showed Allied ships positioned throughout Vorthak space. Each dot represented a species that had found the courage to stand up against tyranny. All units report ready, said Commander Tony Martinez, the ship's tactical officer. He was young but steady under pressure, the kind of officer Admiral Sullivan trusted with difficult missions. Jake Mitchell stood beside the Admiral's chair, wearing a communication headset that kept him connected to the coalition commanders. His diplomatic uniform looked out of place on a warship bridge, but his presence reminded everyone what they were fighting for. Admiral, we're receiving final confirmations from all strike teams, Jake reported. 24 species, 1,600 ships all coordinated for simultaneous attack. Admiral Sullivan nodded. Through the main view screen, she could see Vorthak Prime, the capital world of the Vorthak Empire. The planet was surrounded by defense stations and patrol ships, but they looked smaller than she had expected. Intelligence was right. The Vorthak forces were spread thin across their empire. Remember, this isn't about conquest, she announced to her crew. We're here to free prisoners and show the galaxy that the Vorthak Empire can be defeated. Hit hard, hit fast, and get our people out. Dr. Helen Brooks sat at a console near the back of the bridge, studying the layout of the prison complex below. She had volunteered to guide the rescue teams through the facility she knew better than anyone else alive. The central computer core is 3 levels below the main prison block, she said, her voice calm despite the danger ahead. If we can access those systems, we can release every electronic lock in the complex at once. Lieutenant Commander Steve Martinez, Tony's younger brother, led the assault team that would go down to the planet. He was a Marine officer with commando training, exactly the kind of soldier needed for this mission. "My team is ready, Admiral," Steve reported. "We'll get those prisoners out." The tactical display suddenly lit up with red warning signals. Enemy ships were moving to intercept the coalition forces throughout the galaxy. "Here we go," Admiral Sullivan said. "All ships, execute Operation Righteous Fury, for justice, for freedom, and for the 40,000 who died." The battle began, across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Human ships with their quantum drives appeared without warning near Vorthak installations. Allied fleets that had been hiding in empty space suddenly activated their engines and charged toward their targets. On the Liberty's edge, the crew watched as Vorthak defense ships scrambled to respond to the unexpected attack. The enemy had been caught completely off guard. "Their communication systems are in chaos," reported the ship's intelligence officer. "They're trying to coordinate a response, but our simultaneous strikes have disrupted their command structure." The first phase of the battle went exactly as planned. Coalition forces overwhelmed local defenses at 12 key installations, while rescue teams landed on prison worlds throughout the Empire. The Vorthak military, used to fighting scared and disorganized enemies, struggled against coordinated resistance. But Jake knew the real test was yet to come. The Vorthak Empire had ruled through fear for centuries. Only by capturing their leaders could the coalition prove that era was over. "Admiral, Steve's team has reached the prison complex," Tony Martinez reported. "They're encountering heavy resistance, but they're making progress." On the surface of Morthak Prime, Lieutenant Commander Steve Martinez and his Marines fought their way through the massive prison facility. The corridors were filled with the sounds of energy weapons and shouting voices. Vorthak guards, caught by surprise, were falling back toward the central command area. "This way," Dr. Helen Brooks said, leading them through passages she remembered from her imprisonment. "The computer core is just ahead." They reached a heavy metal door marked with Vorthak symbols. Steve's demolition expert placed charges while the rest of the team provided cover. The explosion echoed through the complex like thunder. Inside the computer room, banks of alien technology hummed with power. Dr. Brooks moved to the central console and began working with the interface, her fingers flying over controls she had watched the guards use. "Got it," she announced. "All prison locks are opening now." Throughout the facility, cell doors slid open and prisoners began to emerge. Humans, Altarians, and dozens of other species stumbled into the corridors, many barely believing they were free. But the mission wasn't complete yet. Steve led his team deeper into the complex, following intelligence that placed Emperor Zekthul himself in the command center. They found him in a room filled with communication equipment, frantically trying to coordinate his scattered forces. The Emperor turned when the Marines burst through the door, his golden mask reflecting the emergency lighting. "Surrender," Steve commanded, his weapon aimed at the tyrant who had ordered so many deaths. Emperor Zekthul laughed, a cold sound that echoed off the metal walls. "You think capturing me will change anything? The Vorthak Empire has existed for 1,000 years. It will survive long after your pathetic species is extinct." "Maybe," Steve replied, "but it won't survive today." The Emperor reached for a weapon, but Steve was faster. The energy blast knocked Zekthul unconscious without killing him. The galaxy would see their former ruler stand trial for his crimes. Back on the Liberty's edge, Admiral Sullivan watched as reports came in from across Vorthak space. The simultaneous attacks had worked better than anyone had dared hope. 12 major installations had fallen, thousands of prisoners had been freed, and Vorthak forces were in complete disarray. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Vorthak worlds," Jake reported, hardly believing what he was hearing. "Local commanders are asking for terms." "Tell them we'll accept unconditional surrender," Admiral Sullivan replied.
Any world that lays down its weapons will be treated with respect and dignity. The news spread quickly through the galaxy. On worlds that had been under Vorthak control for centuries, populations rose up against their oppressors.
The Empire's reign of terror was crumbling faster than anyone had imagined possible. 3 hours after the battle began, Jake stood in the same chamber where 40,000 people had been executed. But now it was filled with liberated prisoners, from dozens of species, all of them free because people had found the courage to act. Emperor Zekthul, now in restraints, was brought before the crowd. The golden mask had been removed, revealing an ordinary face twisted by years of cruelty and power. Jake stepped forward to address not just the crowd, but the galaxy itself. Every communication system in Vorthak space was broadcasting his words. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began. "Today marks the end of the Vorthak Empire's reign of terror. Emperor Zekthul and his followers will face trial for their crimes against sentient life." He gestured to the freed prisoners around him. "These people are proof that tyranny cannot last forever. When good beings stand together, even the mightiest empire can fall." The crowd cheered, but Jake wasn't finished. This victory belongs to all 24 species that found the courage to fight. Humans, Altarians, Zeltharians, and 21 others proved that justice is stronger than fear. Over the following weeks, the galaxy watched as the coalition kept its promises. Conquered worlds were given their freedom. War criminals were tried fairly and sentenced according to their crimes. Humanitarian aid flowed to worlds that had suffered under Vorthak rule. Dr. Helen Brooks established memorial sites on 17 worlds to honor those who had died in the broadcast execution. The names of all 40,000 victims were carved in stone, ensuring they would never be forgotten. Admiral Sullivan oversaw the peaceful transition of power on 200 worlds. Former Vorthak colonies became independent or joined voluntary federations based on mutual benefit rather than conquest. Jake became the first Secretary General of the new Galactic Justice Council, an organization dedicated to preventing future atrocities. The same chamber where people had once been executed now hosted meetings focused on protecting the rights of all sentient beings. 6 months after the liberation, Jake stood before a memorial on Earth. The black stone wall contained the names of every person who had died in the Vorthak execution, including Commander Rick Torres and his team. The inscription at the bottom read, "They died as victims but are remembered as the spark that lit the flame of galactic justice." Their sacrifice made freedom possible for trillions. As Jake read the names, he thought about how much had changed. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, but it was no longer ruled by fear. 24 species had learned they could trust each other. Hundreds of worlds were building new societies based on freedom and cooperation. Most importantly, the universe had learned something about humans. They weren't the strongest species or the most advanced. But when innocent people needed help, humans would fight for them. And when humans fought for justice, they inspired others to join them. The memorial stood as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change everything. 40,000 people had died, but their deaths had not been meaningless. They had become the foundation for a better galaxy. Jake placed a hand on Rick Torres' name carved in the stone. His old friend would have been proud of what they had.